Friends, good afternoon. My name's Mick Napier, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, one of our series of almost regular Sunday afternoon webinars where we discuss with someone we think has something very useful to contribute to the discussion around delivering effective solidarity to the beleaguered people of Palestine. We have had a lot of big hitters on this show over the last year or so, but I'm especially delighted to invite Rabbi Dovid Weiss to join us. And he has joined us from New York, I believe, Rabbi Weiss.
Yes.
Rabbi Weiss is one of the leaders. He's an international spokesperson for Jewish group Neturai Karta. He is very well known indeed internationally, campaigning on issues of Palestinian freedom. And he obviously, you don't get any prizes for realizing that he works on the basis of a Jewish religious ethic, which leads him to that conclusion. Rabbi Weiss, first of all, a lot of Zionists say you guys are insignificant. There's very few of you. Most Jews are militant supporters of Israel. Why do you pretend that you're more important than you are? That's not a view I share, but would you like to respond to the critics before we discuss the substance, Rabbi Weiss?
Well, first, as always, I pray to the Almighty that he should bestow upon me his truth, his wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying his message, and so you can sanctify his name and hopefully, inshallah, being priest to the world. And assalamu alaikum, greetings to all who see this, and hopefully it'll be spread around the world, this message. The issue is, first of all, a basic truth, a basic facts. Now, putting aside just for a second the amount of people who are supporters or who share my view, Rabbi, one of our great leaders, had just passed away, unfortunately, 2 weeks ago. Rabbi Moshe Dov Beck, is known as Moshe Beck, a saint of blessed memory. And he would always say 1 and 1 is 2. You know, the fact, we have to know what the fact is. You can't change it, even if the whole world will just try to dispute with and claim that that's not true. But the fact is fact. You can walk outside here in New York and it's now daylight, and if you're going to say it's night, you're going to prove with all mathematical figures that it's night. It's
ridiculous. But as you know, Rabbi Weiss, the Zionists do not wish to engage with you at the level of ideas and justice. They wish to say, I'm an anti-Semite, you are either a self-hating Jew or irrelevant and insignificant. It's a technique for not engaging. Please develop your
I'm just for the first, I will, with God's help, explain the basic issue why it's clearly the what's called the Jewish state, or that the Zionism is a Jewish ideology. It has to do with the basics of Judaism. That is a bold-faced lie. It is directly antithetical to Judaism. It is the direct rebellion against God, and it's totally unacceptable according to the Jewish religion to have a so-called Jewish state, firstly. And it just happens to be that if you will go around the world, including in the Holy Land, anybody could go to our site, which is nkusa.org, and you can see, for instance, this is when we took up the last chief rabbi who's still alive of the anti-Zionist God-fearing community in 2002, and he's still alive. It's a lifetime job. And well, I can't see, but you can see, maybe it's like
yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of people went to the streets in this block alone. They had over 10,000 people. I think there was, well, it's a stretch for blocks of over 100,000 people. And you find the Jewish people gathering in Jerusalem. This is the direct rabbinate. This is the chief rabbi of the anti-Zionist community. In other words, we don't recognize the state of Israel or their rabbinate, which is a farce. It's window dressing to make it look like it's kosher, like it's some type of legitimate enterprise. And so they have a rabbinate they made and a chief rabbi, while the anti-Zionist community, the community that was living there for hundreds and hundreds of years together with Muslims, they have their rabbinate, which is legitimate and authentic, and a chief rabbi. And so this is the communities that are there. So when you find the gathering of people who are coming up, it's because they're expressly anti-Zionist. I mean, if you come to New York or you go to the Washington, when we make a gatherings, if you come to my neighborhood, if anybody comes to New York, they go to the United States, a lot of people will end up in New York. And in New York, you will see that right across from Manhattan, where the business center is, right across, you can see it from Manhattan. Manhattan is an island and it's connected with bridges. And one is called Williamsburg Bridge. In Williamsburg, right across from that bridge, you will find the largest concentration of religious Jews around the world besides in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. And there is not one single Israeli flag over there. And it's the most religious community. In other words, Jews who are who profess and are clearly religious Jews. They wear it on their sleeve. In other words, they dress as Jews. And you see, and the most scholarly communities, they're all full of many rabbis. And there's not one Israeli flag. And there's a reason for that. It's because we oppose, because we are Jews, we oppose the mere existence of the state of Israel. Now, Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years. We made this bond with God. We accepted upon ourselves the covenant, the Torah, to be subservient to God. And this subservience requires that we are, once we went into exile around 2,000 years ago, that we are put under 3 oaths by God. One is that we should not, return en masse, create our own sovereignty. Secondly, we should not rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country, whether you're in Scotland or the United States. A Jew has to be a loyal citizen in any country where they're existing, where they live, and pray for the well-being of that country. And thirdly, we should not make any attempt to end the godly decreed exile, which what happened with the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. Now, Zionism is a mere, today it's unfortunately 73 years since its ratification by the United Nations, since the start of their enterprise of coming into Palestine and occupying. It's a little over 100 years, but not more. It's a little over 100 years, and so therefore it has nothing, to claim that this is the basics of Judaism is ridiculous. It's a political movement that just started, and all the rabbis around the world, universally, and we have a book on that, stood up in opposition to this. We compiled a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is 130 years of rabbinical opposition from the leading rabbis. Of course, there's tens of thousands of rabbis, but these are the leading rabbis from around the world, who anybody who knows their Jewish, the Jewish religion will know who these rabbis are. I opened the page to Rabbi Yisrael Meir Cohen, called the Chafetz Chaim, and he wants life. He's one of the greatest compilers of Jewish law in the last century and a little over century. In 1933, he passed away, and he wrote in his writings, and everybody respects and follows his teachings. He writes, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. In other words, the whole Judaism starts to rot because of Zionism. And this is somebody, a codifier of Jewish law from Europe, from Lithuania. He passed away in 1933. That was well before the state was even created, but the concept of Zionism was already sprouting its tentacles, whatever, and therefore I'm just showing that the concept is unacceptable, it's contradictory and antithetical to our religion. They say that we should not respect the countries, the indigenous people. We should go up en masse, occupy, which is a breach of what God says. We're not allowed to return en masse. They rebel against the indigenous populace, the peoples that are there. So in every aspect, they are rebelling directly against God, and it's what it is a political movement. It is a material political concept, an ideology, a flawed ideology that is so different than what Judaism, which is subservience to God. It has one of the two. The twain shall never meet. It's two completely different concepts, and it's.
Can I just interrupt you, because I want to?
Sure.
I mean, that's what you've shown. Is that this is not a trivial, marginal point of view. I know that, and it's really important because it's airbrushed out of the news and history and so on. But can I take you back to New York? Did I see a video of an event in New York in a baseball stadium with 10 or more thousand Orthodox Jews, and the language was blistering. I mean, I would hesitate to be so hostile to the state of Israel as some of, I think there was one of the speakers was Yaakov Rabkin, and he was very, very harsh indeed on attacking the violence of the Israeli state against Orthodox Jews. Could you explain that a little bit before we look at the history and
Right.
and so on?
Certainly, yes. We've had many in the largest convention halls and stadiums and Madison Square Garden. Where we had in many of these areas, because we have, thank God, such large communities. So when we call for a gathering of the Jewish people, the rabbis and the laymen, we need a very large area. And as you say, I'm sure you can look it up on our site, and you can see the picture of that gathering in the stadium. And the fact is that not only the Zionists do not respect the rights of the Palestinian people, but of course, being that they're rebelling against God, they have it's not even subconsciously, it's in this the core that they hate and they detest the religious Jews, because we oppose and we declare that their existence is untenable, that it's unacceptable. So they hate us, and what they do is they constantly harass and actually assassinate rabbis through since their existence. Children, they pull off the streets, they beat, an arrest with horses. Older people, they have no respect for anybody. They trample with horses, with tear gas, with anything. There's thousands and thousands of pictures on our site what they do to the Jewish community over there. I wasn't sure if you saw that. And these are Israeli police. They are the Israeli army, the police. Now they have a law that that every boy and girl that is 17 is automatically required to serve in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Force. Now we refuse to, at the cost of our lives. So they arrest, and of course they demean them. They put on their green army uniforms just to demean them and psychologically try to beat them down. This is a girl. She's holding a prayer book that she was praying Tehillim. It's called Psalms from King David, and is crying because they arrested her, as they do constantly, the boys and girls, because we refuse to serve in their army. And this is an ongoing phenomenon. There's, like I say, you can see how they brutally beat, arrest, and kill. Just this week, we have pictures up, I believe, on our site that you can go. That they broke into 30 houses now. They random. They break in. They steal the money. They're common criminals. They went and they took all the money that was in the poor families, whatever they found money, and the computers. But I'm just saying, whatever they found of value, they just stole it also, besides everything else they did.
This happens a lot to Palestinian families, but you're saying it also happens to poorer Jewish families as well.
Constantly. If you look at the pictures that we could, the constant harassment, and I say really the brutality to the religious Jews, and they constantly look for ways to break the backbone of the community. Like they try to put a sports center, because they know that the Jewish people, we have a concept of modesty. So they try to put a sports center right smack in the middle of the very religious community there, or they'll make parades, and it's all just to break the back of the religious Jewish community. They dig up graves. It's according to us, we have the concept that there's afterlife, and there's so there is considered a holiness of the dead body, and we have to respect that. But because they have a boon over there of the facts that Jews lived there 2,000-3,000 years almost, and they have the bodies, the graves of great saints and so forth, and so they dig them up for archaeological purposes. Or they want to build Kavush 6. They wanted to build a highway, so they needed to make an extension, so they just just bulldozed through the cemetery. And I must tell you, and you know that I thank God, as you mentioned, with God's help, I've traveled to many, many Arab and Muslim countries, whether it's Iran or Egypt or you know, or Lebanon and so forth. And I must tell you, for instance, in Egypt, they have something called the Ring Road. In other words, they had the traffic jams, a terrible traffic problem. So they made a ring around Cairo that you should be able to travel if you needed to go off on different exits, and you shouldn't, you know, they should be able to solve the problem of traffic. Now that happened to have to go through a very large old Jewish cemetery. So what they did was, out of respect, they built it on pillars that it should not disturb the graves. It cost millions and millions of dollars, and nobody talks about it, respecting it. I went to Iran. You look, they have many prophets, Mordechai and Esther, and many prophets that are buried, Daniel and so forth. You should see the respect. They pray there also, and the respect they give for the Jews. Well, if you go to Israel now, they have the disrespect is just as they have respect, they have disrespect, and this is a fact. And mind you, if Iran or Egypt or any other Arab or Muslim country would if for some reason, by mistake or somehow, disturb a grave, they're all over it, claiming anti-Semitism. Well, they're doing this constantly. I could go on and on and on with that.
Rabbi Weiss, let's educate people. You talked about the assassination of rabbis. Have I got it right? The first assassination in Palestine by the Haganah was the Jewish spokesman for the Jewish community, Jacob Dahan, who was murdered by the Haganah outside the synagogue. The first assassination was not of Palestinians, but was of a Jew. Would you like to explain that, please?
Yes. This is, we have put out a book called The Struggle. It's a small pictorial history of the struggle of orthodoxy, of Orthodox Jewry against Zionism. It's very interesting. It's just a little booklet of pictures that, so you have from the pictures of how in 1920s, Rabbi Sonnenfeld of blessed memory, he was the chief rabbi in the 1920s, before the Zionists, you know, their farce. So he met with the king of Transjordan to express that the Jewish community that was living there for so long, that we have no want to create our sovereignty, and we oppose it entirely. He even put advertisements in Arabic in the Arab papers. We'll get back to that with God's help. But here is the procession, the funeral procession. This was in July 1st, 1924. Tens of thousands of Jews. They were the smallest community, because there was the greatest community with the Muslims, and then there was the Christian community and the Jewish community. And this fellow, his great person, his name was Professor Yaakov Yisrael Dahan. His blood should be avenged. He was a Zionist. He lived in Denmark, and there's a statue of him in Denmark, because he was a great, a brilliant man, a diplomat, and the king even escorted him when he decided to go up to Palestine. He decided to become religious, and he thought that to become religious, he fell into that, you know, the trap what Zionist is. The best thing is to join Zionism. He went there, but he was searching for the truth, and he almost immediately became aware of the fact that the truly religious were anti-Zionists, and he became very closely attached to this Rabbi Sonnenfeld, the picture I showed you, and this, yes. And he said, you know, your word, and he said, I'll help you, because he knew how to maneuver through the diplomatic world. And he said, I'll get your word heard to the whole world, because you're being oppressed, you know, stifled. You're the voice of the Jewish community by the Zionists. And I will get your word out. The Zionists said they informed him. And they told him they're going to kill him. They told him they're going to assassinate him. And in the middle of the streets, in front of Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, in the middle of the streets of Jerusalem, they went cold-bloodedly. They shot him. And this is the picture of a funeral procession. This is another rabbi who was murdered by them in the middle of a demonstration. They simply beat him to death, and on and on. This is where they're breaking into synagogues, and yeah, it's just.
Rabbi Weiss, this is a history that's not very well understood. Dahan, on behalf of the Jewish community in Palestine, was campaigning against the Balfour Declaration. He was killed because he was a dangerous opponent of the Zionists. That's not very well known, despite your best efforts.
Yeah, but Yeah, we have to know that the works of the Satan is the God allows it that way, but we have to do what we have to do. We shouldn't become intimidated. I mean, because if you would just simply try to understand, the United Nations ratified, for instance, to make a Jewish state, and while the majority of the communities of the people living there were Muslim, and as I mentioned, and the second large community was the Christians, and the third was the Jewish people. Now, how could you take and uproot a whole people of the Muslim community from their area because somebody wants a religious state? It defies what the United Nations is, that is supposed to be a democratic concept of that should not be under religion. But anyway, and that they should ratify this concept at the same time when we know clearly that the rabbis who are living in Jerusalem, it's in the United Nations records, they met with the United Nations representatives, the delegation. His name is Rabbi Dushinsky. After Rabbi Sonnenfeld, when we spoke about earlier, passed away, Rabbi Dushinsky was our chief rabbi of blessed memory, and he met with and these are the records of the United Nations. He met with the delegation, and he pleaded with them. Again, this is in the United Nations records. It's declaration before the United Nations, July 16, 1947. Remember that it was ratified by the United Nations, the State of Israel, in 1948. And he pleaded with the United Nations, because he said, and I'm quoting him, just one sentence I'll quote, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." He said, this very religious Jew, he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition. Now, why would he want to do? He didn't, maybe he did foresee, but all the terrible things that's going to be the outcome of it. But simply because we don't want this Jewish state. Thank you very much, but no, thank you. We don't want a Jewish state. It's not what we're all about. Again, let's just repeat. Judaism is to be subservient to God, to pray, to do good deeds, to follow the Torah. Zionism is a transformation to nationalism, to have a piece of land, an army, to say we're strong and powerful like other nations. We have an Olympic team, we have a Nobel Prize winners, and we're just as great as everybody. We're a nation like any other nation. That's not what Judaism is. It's because they lack the understanding of what Judaism is. They're ashamed of this concept of religion. They're an empty shell. That's what they are. So they try to, to paint this picture of that they're a concept of Judaism as a nationalism, and that's why they love to call it a Jewish state. They don't want to call it the Zionist state. They keep on pressing that it's a Jewish state, and if you say something against them, you're an anti-Semite. I mean, really, it's a whole conversation in and of itself. But there's no greater anti-Semites than the Zionists, because they beat Jews. And they create hate around the world for the Jewish people.
So can you develop that point? Because a lot of people think it's a paradox. A lot of people don't get it. But the early Zionists were viciously anti-Semitic. Their descriptions of Jews in Europe was hostile, demeaning. I mean, I couldn't plumb the depths of language that the Zionists used. I mean, what can I say? Arthur Rupin, one of the founders of the JNF, I mean, his language, nobody could be more extreme in his denigration of Jews than Arthur Rupin, and he's one of the founders of the Zionist program. Can you tell people a little bit about people like that? Because the idea that Zionism is anti-Semitic, a lot of people don't get it. Please develop the point, Rabbi.
Yeah, well, first, just let's look at a picture, just so you get a picture of what we're talking about. This is David Ben-Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in Independence Hall. I just want anybody could Google these pictures and just look at what we're dealing here. Now, they're supposed to be representing a so-called a Jewish state, and they're giving you the name Israel, which Israel is Jacob in the Bible. Now, so you would think if it would be a Muslim state, you would see a bunch of imams, sheikhs, right? Ayatollahs or something. You would see somebody dressed as religious Muslims. They're making a Jewish state. Not one of them sitting here has their head covered, which is a requirement of the Jewish law. I mean, just look at the farce, what you're dealing with, the hypocrisy of this. Now, where is all the great rabbis? Where is the great rabbis of Europe, like that I was showing you, that from every part of the world, of the universe, that every single one, look how they look. They're all with their head covered, with beards, with as a religious Jew, as a religious rabbi. But this is not what they are. They're simply hijacking a religion. We put out a book called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, where part of it has become historical documents. We compiled a lot of quotes from the Zionists themselves. Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, wrote, and this is and he wrote this in his diary. So it's just a little quote, maybe one or two quotes I'll give you. He said, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna. This is in the 1890s or whatever, he wrote his diary. So it's way before the state, but these are the fathers of this movement of Zionism. He wrote, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna, to get an appointment with the Pope, to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. It should be done on a Sunday, in the middle of the day, with music and pride, publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion would be in St. Stephen's Cathedral. I mean, when you hear this, I mean, he's worse than the Nazis, but that's by us. That's not a
sure. But you're saying this, but how many people? I mean, this is absolutely amazing, isn't it? His solution to the Jewish, to anti-Semitism that Jews faced in Europe, everybody should convert to Catholicism.
I mean, we went through the Crusades, the Inquisition, where Jews were forcibly, and he's not embarrassed to write this in his diary. And this is the father who they celebrate of Zionism. Oh, wait, let me just mention Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was the father of he was Begin's mentor. You know, the revisionist Zionists, whatever they would call. And he wrote, and this is a quote from in the Outside the Encampment. It's an article in 1919, October 19, and I'm quoting him. In the national home, they want to create a national home. In the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile, and they refuse to shave off their beards and payas, earlocks, this is called payas, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote. You think this is a Nazi who's saying this, right? Sure. And I mean, I could go on and on. The history of we have of Chaim Weizmann, the first president of the state of Israel. This is later, right? The first president, and he was the one who was the the reason that it was ratified, the state, because of the whole history of Chaim Weizmann, that he helped Britain in World War I. So anyway, and now when the Jews were being actually, they were under danger and they started to be harassed and murdered in Europe, so they had a meeting of the Zionists, which were quite powerful, the Zionist organizations, and they were well connected, because that's what these guys were. They weren't Jewish. They were basically, I mean, they were busy, just getting connected to the political powers. And the Jewishness they dropped. These weren't religious Jews. But what they did, so they had a meeting, and this is in in the 30s. And he said, and they saw the handwriting was on the wall, what's going to happen to the Jews. So they had a discussion of they should save the Jews or using the power of the Zionist organizations. So he wrote like this, Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. We want only the best of Jewish youth to come to us. We want only the educated, meaning culturally educated, not religious educated, to enter Palestine for the purpose of its increasing its culture. The other Jews will have to stay where they are and face whatever fate awaits them. These millions of Jews are dust on the wheels of history and may have to be blown away. We don't want them pouring into Palestine. We don't want Tel Aviv to become another low-grade ghetto. And in other words, let them die. This the worst monster could be say. You wouldn't say such a thing. And this is the head of. And I don't remember if this was by the end of 1930s or 1940s already. And this theme was the Zionist theme. Yitzchak Greenbaum, who was the chairperson of the Jewish Agency's rescue, wrote, when they asked me, couldn't you give money out of the UJA? That's the United Jewish Appeal. That's the Zionist great fundraising. But he said, when they asked me, couldn't you give money out of the United Jewish Appeals Fund for the rescue of Jews in Europe? I said, no. And I say again, no. One should resist this wave which pushes the Zionist activity to secondary importance. Jews should die.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a
So
whole...
they were quite prepared. They were quite prepared to sacrifice the suffering Jews of Europe under.
And they wanted that because they said the more Jews that die, the more the victor goes the spoils. And I'm quoting them. They said that when they're going to divide the lands, they'll be able to look as people who suffered, and they're going to give them more of Palestine. So the more they said, with blood we will get the land.
Can we examine?
So much to talk about. Yeah.
Can we examine that a little bit more closely? It's an axiom of Zionism that people like you cannot live in America, Britain, France, Lithuania, etc. Jews have to leave their countries and go to Palestine. If it's an axiom of Zionism that Jews are always hated and cannot live among the rest of us, surely you could make the argument the Zionists actually need anti-Semitism in order to justify their colonization of Palestine. Would you like to develop that point?
Right. Yes. I mean, they use that concept constantly. They spoke about that. As I said, that the way to with blood we will get the land. In other words, with the falling of the murder of Jewish people will get the land. I'm looking for that quote, which I will, with God's help, give to you. That this is what one of their basic concepts. First of all, they at the time they created. Oh, here we go. I got it. Thank God. This is Rabbi Yisrael Stern, the son of Rabbi Shlomo Stern, has a whole. He put out quotes and everything that he had. This is a Zionist slogan: "Only through blood will the land be ours." We can't help we can't help the Jews of Europe because we need Jewish bloodshed to be able to demand the state after the war. And the letter concludes: "We are sending you a little money so that the Zionist activists can escape." This is what these are a compilation of. We have a book called "The Holocaust Victims Accused," where we have these. It's a book called "The Holocaust Victims Accused." Again, we have that book where you can see the compilation of Zionist material, writing material, where they wrote one to the other, and we have that in Nathan Schwab as the head of the Jewish Agency in Switzerland. We have all their quotes, not all, there's not much, but what we're able to get from them, what they wrote one to the other, and as people who were trying to actually, as you say, create anti-Semitism. I'll tell you though that at the beginning, even when the Nazis closed down Jewish newspapers, but the Zionists, they let them continue because they were working on the same plan. The Zionists wanted the Jews thrown out of Europe so that they'll be able to take them and place them in Palestine. And actually, Stephen Wise, who was the one of the reform rabbi, not religious, a so-called rabbi, Stephen Wise in New York, he actually declared a boycott on Hitler. The rabbis pleaded that they wanted to come through and to be able to plead the case of Jews, that why, what's happening here. And Stephen Wise stood up and he declared a boycott against Hitler to incite them. And Hitler, as quoted by, he had in a book called Min HaMetzer, from the depth of suffering, Rabbi Weissman, of blessed memory, had spoken to one of his representatives of Hitler. Hitler said, when this Stephen Wise declared this boycott, he said, I'll show them. They're going to want to fight with me. I'll show them what I can do. Now, of course, we're not trying to in any way condone or explain away what Hitler did. His name should be obliterated. Whenever we say his name, we say Yamach Shemo. His name should be obliterated. But it happens to be that the Zionists did incite. Our rabbis try to work and to try to placate, as is the way we were taught to do, and try to come through or something, but the Zionists didn't allow that. In fact, the rabbis, over 400 rabbis, marched to Washington to meet with the president, to be able to work out some type of a meeting of with the somehow to save the Jews, meeting with the Nazis or something, and but unfortunately it was they didn't allow it. These Stephen Weiss and the other representatives of the Zionists did not allow them to be able to do this. They stopped. They didn't give the president the permission to meet. They stopped the meeting of 400 rabbis, which was a historic event. They marched to Washington, and they didn't allow this to come about, this meeting with the rabbis, because these were the powers. These were the ones that had the power in Washington. It's a lot of it. This is written, and a Holocaust victim is accused.
No, you're trying to uncover a history which a lot of people wish to cover up. And it's truly shocking, and you've given us a taste of that. I would just appeal to our viewers to follow the issue, to study more and more, and you'll see the fascistic clash between Orthodox Jews and the Zionists from the very beginning. Rabbi Weiss, could I ask you to send a message to the British Parliament? The Westminster Home Affairs Committee has said that we're allowed to use the word Zionism, but we shouldn't use the word Zionist because it is a term of vile abuse. Now, I use the word Zionist. To me, it brings up pictures of the Israeli state, murder, house demolitions, cruelty, terrible suffering. And therefore, when I use the word, I use it in an angry way. The Westminster Committee says I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't use the word Zionist because it's a racist epithet. This is a strange world we live in. Could you respond to that, Rabbi Weiss?
It's ironic, and it's very sad. It's very sad because we had, I think it was Facebook closed us out. Facebook was our site and so forth was disconnected from is it Facebook? I don't work. I just go around doing the speaking, but it was one of these major. I'm asking a colleague here who works on these things.
Please, feel free.
We were cut out.
This isn't one of those quiz shows where you're not allowed to ask your friends.
Yeah.
So
No, just simply, but I don't know if it was YouTube or Facebook or one of they simply closed out issues, and they sent us a letter because it's like, insightful or something like that. Now, I can't understand that. I mean, that our brothers and sisters, both the Jewish and Palestinians, are being brutally beaten. We are totally nonviolent. We go out, we demonstrate, we speak up. We have distinguished rabbis, we have distinguished communities. We're simply pleading that our voice should be heard. We're simply saying that the people are being duped and fooled by a flawed political movement, unacceptable, that's occupying other people. And they're using the name Zionism and Zionists, but we can't use their name that they proudly announce what they're doing with. I mean, it's beyond comprehension. We put out, this is the book I mentioned, The Holocaust Victims Accused. It's really important compilation. I mean, we have over there, but this again, it's a side issue when you talk about Zionism, because this is speaking about the Holocaust period, and it's talking about Britain, Scotland. You should. This is. I would just like to mention one thing. It's at the time, but again, it's a side issue from Zionism, but it's nothing. But it's something that we shouldn't forget. In the Times of London, in June 6, 1961. Rabbi Dr. Solomon Schoenfeld, who served in the period of the Holocaust as the chairman of the Rescue Committee, which was founded by the chief rabbi of Britain, published a letter to the editor which set off a storm amongst British Zionists. And he writes like this: your recent reports of the Eichmann trial, which was Eichmann was one of the leaders of the Nazis, who the gas chambers and everything, the murdering of the millions of Jews. So in the Eichmann trial, so in your recent report of the Eichmann trial included considerable evidence tending to show that His Majesty's government was largely indifferent to and unwilling to take action in defense of the European Jews who were being massacred daily by the Nazis. And this was so in spite of efforts by Zionist leaders to persuade the British Foreign Office to rouse itself into action on behalf of the victims. That's what the Zionists said. And he said, my experience, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, it's the whole thing, but I just want to quote it. My experience, and this is, remember we're talking about Rabbi Dr. Solomon Schoenfeld, who served as the chairman of the rescue committee under the chief rabbi of Britain. He said, my experience in 1942 and 1943, which was the time when the Jews were being slaughtered in millions of Jews, he says, was wholly in favor of British readiness to help openly, constructively, and totally. And this readiness met with opposition from Zionist leaders who insisted on rescue to Palestine as the only acceptable form of help. In other words, they could have saved the Jews. He writes a whole long issue that in 1942, before with council for rescue from the Nazi terror, there was I'm just going to skip over it. In following the United Nations Declaration read to both houses of Parliament in December 17, 1942, and consultation with the Dominion government of India, they declared its readiness to find temporary refuge in its own territories or on the territories under its control for endangered purposes who were able to leave from under Nazi occupation. And as a result of widespread concern, the persistency of within 2 weeks, a total of 277 parliamentary signatures of all parties were signed on to this. And they were ready to, in other words, to save the Jews. And I should add that his government, His Majesty's government, did in fact issue some hundreds of Meridius and other immigration permits. Already, while the parliamentary motion was gathering momentum, voices of dissent were heard from the Zionist quarters. They said, why not Palestine? The obvious answer is that the most urgent concern was humanitarian and not political, and that the Mufti Nazi alliance ruled out Palestine for the immediate savings of the Britain could not add to its Middle Eastern problems. Let me just finish with this. At the parliamentary meeting in 1943, when the next steps were being energetically pursued by over 100 MPs and lords, a spokesman for the Zionists announced that the Jews, these Zionists, would oppose the motion on the grounds of its omitting to refer to Palestine. Some voices were in support, when finally the promoters exclaimed in desperation, if the Jews cannot agree among themselves, how can we help?
So
you know what a scandal this is? In other words, the Jews could have been saved. The Jews could say, and the same thing is Japan. There's a book. We have the documents how Japan offered to take in the Jews. And again, it's a whole history of itself that the Zionists stopped all these efforts to save the Jews because they wanted to build. They needed cannon fodder to build and their homeland there. And in fact,
can I just add to that?
Yes.
I mean, when the British colonial authorities offered a safe place in Mauritius for Jews who were fleeing Nazi Germany, fleeing Europe after the overthrow of Nazi Germany, the Haganah blew up a big ship called the Patria and killed hundreds of Jews to prevent them leaving for a safe place in Mauritius. They were prepared to kill large numbers of Jews in order to prevent them leaving Palestine. Have I got that right?
You certainly do. We have that in this book, The Holocaust Victims Accused. It says, on the sinking of the true Patria with its passengers in the port on November 1st and November 3rd and 1940 respectively, the steamships Pacific and Milos, I don't know if I'm pronouncing Milos right, were intercepted by the British off the Palestine coast with 1,771 immigrants. On November 20, the decision to transfer them with others was announced officially. Arrangements were accordingly made exactly as to transfer the Pacific and Milos passengers to Mauritius on the SS Patria, then in Haifa Harbor. In the meantime, a third ship, the Atlantic, was approaching Palestine with another 1,783 Jews. And on November 24, an arrangement was made to transfer the overcrowded Patria, and the passengers could be accommodated. In November 25th, this is in 1940, with thousands of people watching, the Patria was blown up an explosion and she sank in a quarter of an hour. 252 Jewish refugees from Hitler's burning hell lost their lives. The Zionist propaganda machine turned its full force, declaring that the sinking of the ship was a mass suicide against the British refusal. It was only 10 years later the Haganah General Staff admitted boastfully that it ordered the ship blown up in order to lay the charge, this charge at the door of the mandatory authorities. David Flinker in 1950 in the New York Morning Freiheit, that's a Zionist paper, wrote of the Haganah order, the English must be given to understand the Patria must be blown up. The decision was conveyed to Haganah members, and in the hush of the night purpose had begun, and the execution of this tragic act. He goes on. We have so many facts. These guys are the worst enemy of the Jews. I mean, physically, spiritually, they try to eradicate the Jews. They created distrust of Jews in the Middle Eastern countries. They put bombs in synagogues there. There's a book called Ben Gurion Scandals, where a Jew from Iraq who became a Zionist as a youth, and his name was
Naim Giladi.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I think you should be doing the speaking. I should be doing the interviewing.
You have a much greater authority than I have, Rabbi.
No, but the fact is, in our Jewish communities, we just went through the time period that they celebrate their independence, and amongst the Jewish communities worldwide, we fast that day, we mourn, and we gather in the synagogues. And in fact, again, you can go to our site, you'll see how they're marching in the streets of Jerusalem, and how the Jews are, they put on sackcloths, they mourn, this is our worst enemy that we can possibly have. I didn't have the opportunity really to discuss how my rabbis, and I still remember how Rabbi Moshe Beck of blessed memory, how he used to talk about how he was in Palestine and how the Jews were just the word was horrified, or what by the actions what the Zionists did in that time. In the name, they did it in the name of the Jews. He said, we were living as close neighbors. We lived together in peace and harmony. We have some pictures how Jews lived together and babysat each other's children. This was the existence, how Jews lived together. It was never a question of a necessity to have some police, human rights, from the United Nations to check and keep an eye on that, because it's a given. We live together in peace and harmony, because this is not an issue of a religious conflict between Muslims and Jews, as the Zionists portrayal, a narrative. It's nothing to do with that. We have a distinctly different religion, but that was no reason for any type of strife or hate or any between the two. We lived as brothers and sisters. We helped each other and lived for hundreds and hundreds of years till Zionism breached the walls, came up from Europe, and they decided to create this ersatz Judaism, this Judaism of nationalism that's totally undemocratic, and that's totally something that's a course against Judaism, because God tells us, do not make even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty, because according to the Jewish law, even if it would have been an uninhabited land, Jews, since the destruction of the temple, are forbidden to have even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty. We would oppose their existence even if it would not affect the Palestinian people. But being that it's done by killing and murdering and stealing and uprooting the Palestinian people, it's just another world of a rebellion against God.
Rabbi Weiss, if you wish to join the British Labour Party, I don't think you'll be allowed, because you're an anti-Semite. You're telling the truth.
I'm a proud Jew, and that is why we speak up against Zionism, because it's one of the leaders of the generation, the last generation. His name was Rabbi Teitelbaum, the Satmar Rebbe. He said it's a requirement of every Jew to go into the streets and let the world know that Zionism does not represent Judaism, and that the Zionist movement, the Zionists, do not represent the Jewish people. They are simply masquerading in our religion to gain legitimacy for their crime. And it's totally unacceptable. They intimidate, because that's exactly what they want. They want that people should be fearful to speak up against their atrocities and their occupation, because they know that people will be afraid that they'll be labeled anti-Semitic. That's why they insist on calling it a Jewish state, even though they detest the religion, most of them entirely. But they insist on referring to it as a Jewish state, that it should have connotations of a religious conflict, and that you're anti-Jewish and you're somehow connected with the Nazis from the last generation if you oppose the action, even though they are created, their hands are covered in blood, and their state is the greatest exacerbator of anti-Semitism around the world, because they create a rift. Whereas all the Jewish communities of the Middle Eastern countries, we all lived there for thousands of years. We flourished in Iran and in Egypt and all the, and they're almost non-existent because of the anti-Semitism and the mistrust and suspicion that they placed on Jews. I must say that Iran constantly distinguishes between Judaism and Zionism. And I have to really give them the greatest credit till today, even though the Zionists constantly are attacking them verbally and in other bad ways, and constantly accusing them of being anti-Semitic. But they have synagogues. I was there, thank God, and I love to go to the Arab and Muslim countries. We go there and we see they have synagogues with big Hebrew letters that they're synagogues, and they pray there, and they
Come on, Rabbi. Well, Rabbi Weiss, you're saying you travel in Middle Eastern countries among these Arabs and Iranians. Come on, everybody's taught that this is an ancient hatred and that you're in great danger from dangerous Arabs and dangerous Iranians. Are you trying to tell me that's not true?
I can just first of the knowledge of all the rabbis who we had their letters of speaking how and the facts in the ground, that we have authors of great books and all who flourished. These communities flourished in every one of these countries, whether it's Egypt, Iran, Lebanon. I'll go through in every single Arab and Muslim country almost there was large Jewish communities, and the cemeteries are there for anybody to see. Till the advent of Zionism, we flourished. We put out the greatest rabbis there. And then the fact is, even today, in this atmosphere that the Zionists unfortunately portray every Jew to be a supporter of them, still in all, when we go there, and I went to these countries, now I went to Turkey, even after when they attacked their ship, the Mavi Marmara ship there, and I went there afterwards to console the ones, and we went to the hospital to visit the injured. And still in all, wherever we went, the people embraced us and said, they showed their love. We went to Gaza. We went to visit the orphanages. We cried it's heartbreaking. We went to visit, and the people, wherever we went, gave us the greatest respect and friendship. They displayed the friendship, and they said, we lived with Jews. We remember how we lived together in peace. It's the constant, the same, it's off script. It's non-script. We met with people. We went to visit in Zaytun, the Samuni family. I believe it was like one bomb killed. I think I remember how it was 29 or something. We went, and they was living in squalor. There's a year after it happened. They like in what you would call a tent, but it's not a tent. It's a piece of plastic, freezing in the winter, no water, and we embraced them, and cried with them, and still in all, they said they don't have a hate for the Jews. It's a fact that they embraced us, the children. So the facts on the ground. We went to Iran. We were there so many times for weeks, and we would go without any police escort. We would go every day to the synagogue. We went to traveling through with taxis, with walking, and everybody. In fact, I went to a kiosk or something I needed, and I didn't have I had only American dollars with me to buy stuff, and I didn't have the Iranian money at the time. So somebody came over and said, "Oh, you know what? I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it." People came over and they saw we're foreigners, and they tried to help us constantly.
Arab and Middle Eastern hospitality is a bit difficult for people to deal with coming from a place like Scotland, I can tell you. It's very dangerous to go there, but the thing that will kill you is the hospitality. It's amazing. Too much tea. Rabbi Weiss, look, it's a real pleasure. I could talk to you for another hour, but I know you are a busy man. Would you like to make some concluding remarks, a message to viewers? What about those fools or those naive people who accept the Zionist argument that Jews support Israel and therefore Jews are in some way responsible for the crimes of the state of Israel? At Scottish PSC, we fight this idea completely. we say anti-Semitism is a crime, anti-Zionism is a duty. Would you agree with us, Rabbi Weiss?
100%. We to the world at large, and especially the Muslim and Arab world, we plead with them that they should accept, although we're not the ones who did this, accept the apologies of the Jewish community at large. We cry and suffer with the people of Palestine and in the refugee camps in Lebanon and throughout the world who are displaced, their children and grandchildren. We feel the suffering, and we are frustrated that our voice is not heard. From day one, we protested against them, and we were assassinated for it, and we were killed. Until today, we stand up around the world. Our voices are stifled because of the pressure of Zionism around the world. Even some newspapers who would like to print it are fearful of being labeled anti-Semitic. But we, around the world, invariably, wherever there is a very religious Jewish community, the more religious, the more anti-Zionist. In London, you have in the Stamford Hills, you will. It's almost impossible to find an Israeli flag because it's a very religious community, and they protest and demonstrate constantly. So we plead with the world to differentiate between Judaism and Zionism, as you so eloquently said. Do not refer to it as a Jewish state, because that's what Zionism wants you to do. So it gives you the connotations, you the Jews, the Jewish state, as if you're anti-Semitic. Remember, clarify, be very careful to call it the Zionist and the Zionist state. Now, to the Jewish people, I plead with them because there are many, unfortunately, mostly from the non-religious communities. They have the idealistic students, young ones, who come from mostly non-religious, and they're the settlers you're always seeing who go to the settlements because they're idealists, and they read their writings of the Zionists, and they think they're doing God a favor or something, and they go there putting their children at danger. I mean, they're occupying and they're doing things that is totally a rebellion against God. We plead with them that they should step back and look at the writings of all the rabbinical authorities. And why is it, they should question themselves, why is it that the more the religious the community, the ones who give their lives, the communities that give their lives for their religion, study all day and eat the kosher food like it should be, and the very religious, the more religious, the more anti-Zionist. So if they're real idealists, they should really look for the truth, and they will see that the support of the state of Israel is rebelling against God is a crime. We plead with the world, again, differentiate between, and let the world know that we constantly, around the world, we join with the Palestinian people. We're in solidarity. We went to Gaza, our rabbis from day one have been meeting with the heads. In fact, when President Arafat, when they made the Palestinian Authority, this is we had our spokesperson, and they poured acid in his face, and he was blind in one eye and barely able to see from the other, because he lived in Jerusalem and Al-Quds, and he spoke up against Zionism. This is the sad truth. So we always speak up, and we together, and we pray to God, and we urge everybody, pray for the speedy, because ultimately everything is God's hand. So you should bring a speedy and peaceful total removal of the occupation of the Zionist state of Israel. And we tell the world, the Jewish world, it says in the Torah, it says, why are you rebelling against me? God says, you will not be successful. The state will end. So let us pray that it should happen speedily and peacefully. People should not be intimidated. Speak clearly against Zionism and speak up until God brings this total end of the occupation. Speak up for the Palestinian people, speak up for the suffering, and with God's help, we will be doing God's will, and God will see what we're doing and bring a speedy and peaceful, free Palestine, and ultimately where all the world will serve God in harmony, and the end of this, with the terrible the COVID and all the other, where people are suffering. The world should joyfully serve God in peace and harmony.
Rabbi Dovid Weiss from New York, I want to thank you most sincerely for joining in this conversation today. Nobody stands up for the Palestinian people more than he does. He never misses an opportunity to expose the crimes of the Zionist state against the people of Palestine. And I appeal to all those people who might be taken in by the Zionists, that Jews are in some way responsible for those crimes, to reflect upon what Rabbi Dovid Weiss said to us today. Again, Rabbi Weiss, a very large thank you. I hope when the lockdown is over, you'll follow in the footsteps of your friend, of your fellow, Rabbi Aaron Cohen, from Manchester. We had him up here some years ago to speak to meetings with people operating from various religious ethical systems, and it was very successful. So can I invite you after the lockdown to come and speak for us in Scotland at a suitable opportunity?
I would love to. I would love to. It would be the greatest honor and privilege.
Well, it'll be an honor for us. It'll be a great honor. Rabbi Dovid Weiss, sorry, thank you very much again. And we look forward to working together for freedom for the Palestinians.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum to all Muslim and Arab.
Thank you. I've just got two announcements. One, it was really amazing to listen to Dovid Weiss, Rabbi Weiss, talk about the depravity of the Zionists towards European Jews during the Holocaust, the beatings and assassinations of Jews, religious Jews in Israel. So we have allies. We may be operating, we've had speakers operating from Muslim, Christian, Jewish, other ethical systems. We overlap on the issue of freedom for Palestine and support for the beleaguered people there. And we also look forward to a peaceful resolution of the crisis brought about by Zionism in the Middle East. And we will go forward on that basis. I don't know if Rabbi Weiss's knowledge is encyclopedic, and I hesitate to suggest that something even he may not know about. But I did a bit of research recently into the JNF, the Jewish National Fund parks in Israel, Palestine, and I came upon one of them. One of them is the Memoria Forest, and it was opened by a senior judge from the Argentine Supreme Court, all sorts of other dignitaries, and it claims to represent the Jews who were murdered by the brutal junta in Argentina between 1976 and 1983. But it covers over the fact that when those Jews were murdered, 3,000 out of 30,000 who were killed by that anti-Semitic dictatorship, some young Jews were tortured there with pictures of Adolf Hitler on the wall inside the torture chambers there. The spokesman for the Jewish community in Buenos Aires, Jacobo Timmerman, later protested against Israeli support for that government. The government that was doing the most to arm that junta was the Israeli government. There were more Argentine officers undergoing training in Israel than any other country in the world during the torture. And Jacobo Timmerman says he can forgive lots of people, but he can never forgive the Jews who were responsible, he meant the Israeli government, for the torture and brutalization of those young Jews in Israel, in Argentina. And, and the park claims to represent and commemorate those Jews who were killed. It covers up completely the role of the state of Israel in training the torturers, in arming the torturers, because so depraved was that junta that even the United States Congress declared an arms embargo, and Israel stepped in and supplied the arms and the training. It is a shocking story. The JNF is an organization on your doorstep. Tony Blair is a patron here in Britain, and we want to work together with people of the caliber of Rabbi Dovid Weiss, of everybody of goodwill, to campaign against the racist oppression of the Palestinian people. So please, if you're in Scotland, join Scottish PSC. If you're somewhere else, join a local campaigning group. If you're religiously Jewish, get in touch with Rabbi Dovid Weiss and people like him, and we will go forward. Friends, thanks again. And thanks again, Dovid Weiss, a real honor. Ma salama.